When does retail therapy become a problem? And how much stuff is too much? Compulsive shopping and hoarding. Next on Toronto Speaks Addiction. Hi, I'm Dr. Vera Tarman and welcome to Toronto Speaks Addiction. Tonight we're discussing excessive shopping and hoarding. After a long day, many of us go shopping as a way to feel better. When does shop till you drop become a problem? And when does holding on to too much stuff become a serious issue? Joining me tonight are our guests Joshua Montgomery, Director of Operations at Bellwood Health Services, and Elaine Birchall, Hoarding Specialist at Birchall Consulting. Joshua Montgomery is a registered nurse working with people who can't control their shopping or who resort to shoplifting. Both of these are activities that can give a feeling of excitement leading to compulsivity. Elaine Birchall is a registered social worker specializing with people who hoard their possessions to the point where it has become unhealthy. Have you ever been tempted to buy clothes that you don't need just to feel better about yourself? Is there such a thing as a shopaholic? What do you do if you have trouble throwing things away? If you have questions about your own or perhaps someone else's compulsive shopping, please give us a call. But let's start, first of all, Joshua, with talking about shopping, because we need to have stuff before we can hoard it. So what is compulsive shopping as opposed to just shopping? Because everybody likes to go shopping.
Sure, you know, that's a great question, Vera. Everybody does like to go shopping. When shopping becomes compulsive, it's just that, it's compulsive. When can I no longer stop this behavior? When is it that somebody may have tried to intervene on this behavior? Has anybody suggested that this behavior is becoming maladaptive, that it's affecting my life? Is it affecting my finances? And yet I just can't stop doing it. Am I compulsively buying, the same thing? Is it, am I collecting things? Am I collecting things and have to have every different color of that thing? These are all things that eventually it becomes compulsive.
But isn't it really just a question of if you can afford it? Like, what happens if you have a lot of money and you can afford to buy, like money is not an issue?
And you know what? And that's very true. The sad fact of the matter is, for some people, they do have a lot of financial means, and maybe it's not affecting their life, so it's not becoming a maladaptive behavior. Individuals that it's affecting them to such a negative degree are individuals that are spending, rent or their mortgage payment, or not feeding themselves or their children because they're shopping so much.
Right.
Individuals that do have a lot of money may have what you would classify as a shopping addiction, but because it's not having the same negative consequences,
right,
it may not become prevalent or an issue for that matter.
So it may not even become an issue.
Yeah.
So what about credit cards? I mean, people get credit cards 2 or 3 in the mail. So
yeah. And so often you see that a lot of individuals that have shopping addiction, they kind of rationalize, okay, it's one credit card, and they're maybe making the minimum payment, and then the second one comes in, and then the third one.
Right.
And then eventually, you have creditors coming after you, so this becomes, it puts you, if you're married or have a partner, puts a lot of strain on the finances of the household.
Yeah. It looks like you want to say something. Did you want to add to that?
I see exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
And often the people have more than enough means, but it isn't just when it creates a debt. In my case, it's when there isn't enough room in the house to house even more things, when all of the cupboards are full, when the clothing is kept in the basement, when the price tags are still on the items, and this is not an uncommon situation.
Wouldn't that just be a question of buying more organizing space or getting,
The house actually won't hold the amount that's being purchased, no matter whether it's clothing or it's food or it's some other object that is particularly attractive and appealing and enticing to the person. The space, even in a house, I'm thinking of a situation that I worked with a practicing psychiatrist.
Yes.
It was a 6,400 square foot home.
Wow, that's pretty big.
In this case, it was paintings and clothing. You can imagine how much space there is in a 6,400 square foot home.
Yes.
Yet none of those paintings were on the wall. There was nothing on the walls. They were all stacked front to back throughout the entire house.
Yes.
Except the space where there were piles of clothing. Clothing that wasn't even in the size that the person took or was ever going to take.
Yeah, you know, speaking of people with means, I'm just thinking about stories that I heard, like Michael Jackson or Oprah, just going into shops and I'll buy this, I'll buy this, I'll buy this, and there just seems to be something that's like compulsive about that.
They're playing out the compulsion, and even though it's not putting them in debt, they are making that compulsion worse. They are digging that rut deeper and deeper and deeper.
How are they making it worse?
They're making it worse because they're feeding the compulsion with the gratification of so much stuff that it's excessive to, they will never live long enough.
Well, and that compulsion too is also fed by the endorphins and the dopamines, right? So you go in and you purchase something, and then you get this rush of gratification, right? And the various degrees of shopping addiction, or the subtypes, you know, regardless of what it is, you know, taking the collector for example, you go in and you see that, you know, I've got to have this you know, jersey,
the Prada bag, or
the Prada bag, but the special edition Prada bag
at the Winners,
right? And there it is, and so then you get this rush, and it just reinforces that feeling. It's that pleasure center of the brain.
Okay, so then I have a question for you. And by the way, if there's anybody out there who's wondering that they're shopping, they want to check out, is this a problem or is this okay? Please give us a call. We're here to answer your questions. The way that you're talking about the dopamine and the endorphins and the compulsion. So is it an addiction?
It is. You know, I bet you a number of years ago they didn't really classify it as an addiction, but as we get, you know, more in depth and learn more about addictions, we recognize that really any behavior that any one of us can routinely do, if it becomes maladaptive in nature, can be an addiction. If it is providing us with some sort of reinforcement or gratification because it's filling a void, it can easily become an addiction. If it's, you know, if we continue this behavior, whether it be using a substance, buying something, going online, you know, if we're using it to the point that we can't stop it, despite, you know, numerous attempts to stop it, it can become an addiction.
Now, one of the things that we talk about in the addiction circles is, you know, it's a disease of more. So it's there's the reinforcement and the gratification, but there's also the I just want more, just want more and more and more, and that would fit the.
It would, because it would most certainly fit. You know, maybe this time it's, you know, I like shoes, you know, and you know, this time one pair of shoes satisfies my that quench, you know, but the next time it's, no, you know, I need two pairs of shoes, and maybe the third time it's, well, buy one, get another pair free, and so now I'm going to buy four, right? So it does, it is more, and it's progressive in nature.
Did you want to add something to that?
In my case, a little bit different. The genesis is different.
What do you mean by that?
Well, so it's not so much the endorphins. It's as much about attachment.
Okay.
So not having to use, having to have.
Oh, really?
Having just for the purpose of having it.
Oh.
So the attachment is very strong, and the security and quelling. So the shopping is more of a ritual that quells the anxiety and the compulsion. And so they play out this ritual of whatever it is. And also, shopping does not necessarily mean you pay for the item. I have had clients where the attraction was so strong, even though they had the means to pay for it, it was more the risk-taking behavior on a small item.
I'm going to have to cut you off. If there's anybody out there who wants to ask some questions, please call in, and we will be right back after the break with more help on Toronto Speaks Addiction. Welcome back to Toronto Speaks Addiction. I'm Dr. Vera Tarman, and joining me today are Joshua Montgomery and Elaine Birchall. Today we're discussing the issues of shopping addiction and hoarding. If you think you need help with both or either of these issues, please give us a call. Okay, now Joshua, you mentioned different categories of shopping. Do you want to, or shopping behavioral issues? Can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yeah, so there's shoppers, are Shopaholics Anonymous kind of identifies these, right? And they kind of categorize themselves. So individuals that are compulsive shoppers. So these are individuals, it doesn't matter what I'm buying, I have to shop.
I just want to shop.
I just want to shop.
Yeah, so like for example, sometimes if I'm feeling a little bit like I need a boost, I'll say I'm just going to do some grocery shopping because I need to do grocery shopping.
Right.
I may not really need to, but it feels useful. So it's just the idea of buying something.
That's right. They might go to their favorite mall, and in that mall there's maybe, a handful of stores that they frequent, but it could be any store within that mall. They just have to have something.
Okay.
And then you kind of have your trophy shoppers, where, as I mentioned before, this is an individual that is compelled to buy so that they look kind of like they're competing with the Joneses, that they have more than actually what they should have.
Yeah,
they're spending beyond their means. And then you have kind of these collectors that they collect a variety of things. So they might collect baseball cards,
or cars,
and
vintage cars,
vintage cars, and often when there are items to collect, there's often this special edition item, and so that attracts collectors even more. And so these individuals will have to have that. Or even if it is a benign thing that they're collecting, if it comes in 4 different colors, they have to have each of every color. And so those are kind of the
There's also bargain hunters, like I got the sales. I bet you see a lot of those folks, eh?
It's a rationalization for the behavior.
So do you want to elaborate on that?
So,
I mean, I'm just thinking about people who have like tons of toilet paper, bags and bags and bags in their basement. Anyway, go ahead.
And a lot of people think that has to do with living through the Depression or deprivation, but billions of people went through the Depression and they don't hoard. There is such a thing as adaptive hoarding, all right? The people who went through the deprivation or the Depression, they may hoard, but they hoard adaptively. So they buy in bulk when prices are low, but they never leave it till they have a storage area full and it's all past its expiry date.
So that's not something that you would worry about so much?
Not at all. Not at all.
And then you're saying
maladaptive hoarding is buying for the compelling need to buy it and have it, even though you're not going to use it. It isn't the need to use it, it's the need to have it. And there are different types of saving.
I actually would like to know more about that, but I just want to invite the callers to call in. If you have any concerns about the way you're holding on to things, if you're an adaptive hoarder or a maladaptive hoarder, or the way you shop, please give us a call. We've got the experts on the panel. So you mentioned now a couple of times that there's different categories of hoarding too.
Absolutely.
So do you want to elaborate?
So you've got basically 4 different types. One is a generalist or an indiscriminate. These people will acquire in whatever means necessary.
Just whatever it is.
Buying, borrowing, stealing, curb trawling, and everything is kept chaotically. Anything from valuable items to human waste.
Human waste?
All mixed in together. The piles are chaotic. You've got specialists or discriminate hoarding, and that is...
Sorry, I have to ask you, how can hoarding human waste be in any way attractive? Like in any way of thinking?
Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Necessity is in the eye of the beholder. So not to say that somebody who is acquiring and keeping things, saving things in that kind of chaotic, unhealthy mix is entirely using their best rational brain all the time. But that is the way they keep and store. Discriminate hoarding or specialists, a little bit like Joshua was talking about, the attraction to specific categories of things that have high reward and high attraction, that amygdala is really being triggered.
So could you say that the fellow who has the 60 types of Mercedes or motorcycles is a hoarder?
Depends if he meets the criteria. There are 3 criteria for hoarding too. So the third type of hoarding we see more, we find it more among our seniors, and it coexists with Diogenes syndrome, hallmarked by abject self-neglect and squalor. Even when finances aren't a problem, eating rotten food, keeping rotten food, the squalor, the unhealthy living conditions, the unsafe living conditions because of the buildup. And then animal hoarding. Animal hoarding is the fourth.
Hold on, you mentioned that, and I want to. What you mentioned the criteria and also the Diogenes syndrome, which I would have thought was a form of dementia. But just before, callers, we got some fascinating stuff here. So please, if you are thinking you might want to call in, we invite you to call in.
A lot of people aren't doing this themselves, but they're very worried about somebody, a neighbor perhaps, or a family member, and they don't know how to start the conversation. You know, maybe they've tried in the past. So if there's anybody out there who's worried about somebody, that would be another reason to call in and get some resources.
But no, this isn't a form of dementia, like this sense of...
Not necessarily, no. No, the person, when they're measured, can be perfectly cognitively intact. Are they operating by the same criteria that the rest of us do? Making decisions? Not entirely. Certainly not in this one way. And then there are 3 different saving patterns, and we are all we all experience one or more of these ourselves. The question is how much we allow it to control our life. One is sentimental saving, and you find you find that people are trained to be to have ideas, values, beliefs, and fears that support sentimental saving. Somebody gave me this cup, and if I lose this cup, I've lost that person irrevocably.
Or just my report card from when I was in grade 6.
Absolutely. Somehow there's a big loss. And the pity about that, Vera, is that all tangible things are going to have an end. It's going to be lost, stolen, broken, or something. So if you are making this your touchstone for your emotional health, or a reason not to deal with the grief or the loss that went along with the event, the clock is ticking, all right, on that. There are the people who save things for intrinsic. They see an intrinsic value. This thing has value. You don't see it, you don't see it, but I see it.
I see.
And they place a lot of value on that. And then you have aesthetic saving, which is a little bit, I think, Joshua, maybe what you were talking about, which is the attraction to the Prada purse,
the must-have.
and creating collections. Now, that's at your end. At my end, they tell themselves that they're collectors, but the house is full. And the thing about a collection is there's a certain social relationship. You want people to come in. You want to display it. You want to share it. You're proud of it.
And that's not the case here.
They tell themselves they're collectors, but there is no way they can enjoy it. They can't find it half the time.
Of course.
And we see that with shopping addiction as well. They convince themselves that they're, you know, this collector, when in fact, no, it sits in the back of their closet with tags on, and you know, they eventually let it go to, you know, one of these stores.
Now, tell me, if, Joshua, what you would think about this. When I talk about this with my clients, I say, okay, in the old days, we used to have window shopping, so people would look at stuff and salivate, but they wouldn't actually buy it. So if you do want to shop, then buy, but don't leave the mall and then return it later. But that's actually another form of shopping addiction.
And actually I was going to mention that as well. That's they refer to that as bulimic shopping, where you purchase a number of items and so much of it, and then there's maybe this overwhelming guilt shame or recognition that, yeah, I just can't afford this.
Yeah.
So I'll return a portion of it,
Yeah.
not all of it. But if, maybe I spend $1,000, I'll return $800 of it.
Right.
But slowly, still, that $200 adds up.
Yeah.
And maybe not right away.
I would imagine that the stores must recognize this behavior.
They do, but I mean,
Yeah.
if you're coming in every other week or every other day,
Yeah.
they're not going to stop the behavior. I mean, you're a frequent flyer, and they love your business.
But if you're a frequent returner, they're probably not happy about that.
No, but I think they often look at
The upside.
There's the upside.
Exactly.
Yeah, you can't return it all.
No.
Well, certainly in the case of the example I gave first with the $1,200 a day buying habit,
Yeah.
and then literally each second day having
Yes.
to return 1,000 of it, you can imagine how shameful that was to the person. This person actually would start out to go to Max Milk for milk or bread and almost go into a dissociative state where they really were in a fog and find themselves realizing they had arrived at Winners, or I don't want to give any particular store a bad name, but a store that requires you to really look.
Yes.
And the first time they really felt the fog start to lift
Yes.
was that jolt of joy and pleasure when they were putting the first thing in the basket. Yeah, and I've developed a strategy for conscious acquiring that I use with my clients to help them put themselves on pause, make themselves accountable, go through some healthy choices, behavior choices, and then consider what the best choice they can make that day is.
Great. I want you to hold those thoughts because we have a caller. There's a couple of things you said. I want to go back to the animal hoarding and the saving. I don't know if you finished on the saving thing. And I want to ask you more about the concept of addictive shopping versus is it an addiction or not? But Joe, you have a you have a question, so give us a call. Or please give your question. Joe?
Hello?
Yeah.
Hello?
We can hear you.
Yes. Do you hear me?
Yes, I can. Go for it.
Yes, wondering from the individual there, not the addictive shopping, the hoarding in particular. How does that coincide with OCD? How do you find the difference?
Okay, thank you.
Define the difference, yeah.
Oh, great. So the difference between addictive shopping, or pardon me, hoarding, or is it a compulsive behavior? Do you want to speak to that?
That's a really, really good question,
Oh,
Joe.
yeah, OCD.
Because from my experience, the OCD can be a major factor when the person feels that they're playing out the need to complete a set. So OCD plays out different ways: symmetry, complete, repetition, and OCD can be, it isn't always, but even OCD, Joe, is a continuum. You don't have to be the worst person, you don't have to be a person with the worst case of OCD for it to still start to impact your life negatively. And so there are therapists who deal with OCD. If it isn't hoarding that you're actually asking about, I'd be happy to help you if it is, but there are other therapists locally who deal with OCD and are experts at it who could help this person get a handle on learning to manage their OCD.
But can you elaborate? I'm having a hard time envisioning how would hoarding be an OCD behavior, obsessive compulsive behavior, as opposed to an addiction? So
with the OCD, the person feels that compulsion.
Okay,
all right, so because
acquire.
OCD is about compulsions and rituals to quell the compulsion. So the compulsion is to acquire.
Okay.
All right, and acquire by, in this case, perhaps buying.
Okay.
And so when they go, they feel that compulsion and that anxiety rising. They need a behavior to engage in, and they choose buying, or they choose stealing, or they choose curb trawling. And when they put themselves in the environment where they can, just in this case, purchase, they see shirts and then they need the complete set of shirts.
So the ritual is the actual purchasing or acquiring.
And the driving factor in many of the cases that I deal with is that they are completing a set.
Right. So if I can just, so in a sense, it's a way to quell anxiety as opposed to getting a euphoric buzz.
And with shopping addiction, it would be a euphoric buzz, but a lot of the time, too, where we would see OCD as an individual, again, like any other addiction, they may have a concurrent issue, maybe depression, maybe an anxiety disorder, and it's gone untreated. And one day something happens, and they just go out and they go, you know what, today I'm just going to buy something. And all of a sudden, that rush just reinforces and it settles that anxiety, right? And so somebody may have a mild OCD that, maybe they lock the door 2 times, but nobody really notices. They don't even really notice. And, but they've got this heightened anxiety. But again, that shopping has settled that anxiety that day. And again, it just reinforces that.
Right.
Now my anxiety's gone. So now the next time I feel a little anxious,
so
maybe I'm going to go shopping again.
So you could say that shopping as well could be a kind of OCD as opposed to addiction per se.
I wouldn't say the shopping itself would be an OCD. I would say the individual would probably have OCD to begin with.
I see.
And
then using addiction as a
means of settling that anxiety.
Joe, are you finding this speaking to your experience at all?
Yes, you are. Yes.
Do you want to ask something further?
I think you kind of answered the question. It kind of pertains to me. I got what I wanted.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there any way that we can help you further?
No, ma'am. I just wanted to ask those questions.
I thank you so much, Joe, for taking the time to call us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Okay, so it does really lead into the whole idea about is this behavior an addiction or not? So do you want to start with that, Joe, and then you can, I don't think you think it does, so I'm interested in knowing the differences.
I think it's a similar behavior coming from a different starting point.
Okay, so why don't you start up and then...
Yeah, so when Elaine was speaking about different starting points, often in addiction we see that there is either an underlying mental health issue, maybe there's a trauma, maybe there's a genetic predisposition, and all these things kind of go unrecognized or untreated, and maybe you don't even recognize that you have depression, and then you go and you buy something that maybe is nostalgic to you, and that's the first event, much like somebody is maybe depressed and they have that first sip of alcohol, and what it does is it satisfies that, it calms you, and you go, okay, I actually feel settled right now, and maybe it's the next day or a week later, you do it again, and then again, and then again, and then it's more and more, and before you know it, you've created this pattern, right?
Yes.
And it's a behavior that you continuously subscribe to, where it then kind of goes into the realm of addiction is when now you're not paying your bills. Maybe you're not able to buy a gift at Christmas for your family. Maybe you're not able to pay rent. Maybe you're getting a little angry when somebody says, hey, let's not go shopping today, let's actually go to the beach or something. Right? And you get frustrated and angry because you're not able to do what it is that you want to do.
Okay, and now you wanted to add to how it's not quite like...
So it's less about the effect.
Okay.
All right? It's more about the attraction. It's more about the need to have.
Yes, that's what you said before.
And there's a never-ending, there is never enough.
Of having.
And there isn't any question of getting angry because if it's not going to be, and very rarely, in fact, in 14 years of working with individuals who hoard and those who, their family members, those who love them, I don't think I've ever had somebody who hoarded, engaged in hoarding behavior, acquiring, with another person.
Oh, really? It's always a solo event.
So if it's not going to fit into the agenda, it's probably going to happen anyway. It's going to happen in secret.
Callers, if there's anybody here who wants to call about their shopping behavior or if they're holding on to stuff and they're worried about it, please give us a call. Elaine, can I get you back to the, you didn't finish the category about pet or animal hoarding. I find that intriguing.
There are actually 6 subtypes of animal hoarding. That in itself is probably a show.
Well, tell me, I love dogs.
We're talking about situations.
I have fantasies of having my own dog breeding, just so I can have more dogs.
Yeah.
Please, my partner, don't get worried about this. Anyway, go ahead.
So with animal hoarding,
yes,
we always go back to the definition to check it. Okay, so it is that the numbers do not support the minimal care of the animal with respect to nutrition, veterinary care, and the ability to meet that group of dogs' breed needs.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
And so
you could be a breeder but not be a hoarder, or
absolutely,
you could be a breeder and a hoarder.
Or you could be someone calling yourself a shelter when actually you're a hoarder.
Wasn't that now? That's
absolutely
interesting.
Oh yeah. So I have some stories that would curl your hair.
Okay.
The thing about animal hoarding is.
Why don't you give us one of your stories?
So so yes, and you can as an individual find yourself in this situation. All right. We lost one of our dogs. We always have 2 dogs and 2 cats at any time, and 2 children, but they grow and the dogs stay. We lost one of our dogs, and the other dog was an older dog, and so she was really declining with the loss of her sister. So we thought we would go and adopt an old dog to be with her and let her pick a friend.
Yes.
And unbeknownst to us, I just didn't think to check the reputation of this shelter.
Okay.
It was advertised, and I went, and she ended up picking a half Rottweiler, half Shepherd, much to our dismay. But as I was going along, I saw a golden retriever. She was a golden retriever, and I said, what about this dog? No, that dog's going somewhere else, and no, that dog's spoken for. And so I went along all the cages, and there was a female yellow lab that I thought might be a good mix. And what about her? Well, no, she was being sent off to Napanee the next day. The next day in the newspaper, there was an article that someone had broken into someone's backyard, actually cut the chain link fence to steal their dog, and it was the same golden retriever that I saw at the shelter.
So she stole it.
They stole it. It turned out that they were a vigilante group of people purporting to be a shelter. They must have had 50 dogs in that premises. And it was only because I called the newspaper and asked them to call the people, have the people call me. And I told them, I think I saw your dog. I still didn't realize that these people had stolen the dog and that they were a vigilante group.
So you've got the shelter kind of hoarding, and then you've got the, I would imagine you have collector hoarding too.
You have people who will go and pick up a stray and not return it. Say your dog gets out of your backyard and they don't return it.
Well, that's theft. Well, I guess
in the eye of the beholder.
Yeah, because they see it as a stray.
And you know, you have people who breed for profit and have no concern for the numbers, the care, the genetic mix that they're breeding, and what that's going to do to the animals, the puppies that are born, and you know, destroy the puppies if they're not sold.
Oh boy!
So you really want to know who you're dealing with when you choose a dog to mate your dog with, or you choose a dog to make part of your family.
Okay, now you mentioned a couple of times the stealing and, well, just a couple of times. Joshua, what do you think about that idea of not shopping but shoplifting? If there's an addictive element, like that euphoric.
Yeah, we don't see as much of that at Bellwood. We have seen it, and where we do see it is that, you know, an individual maybe has strapped all of their finances, and so now they're resorting to other means of satisfying that shopping addiction.
Right, yeah.
Although, you know, we were speaking earlier as well, and we have seen few and far between some individuals that, you know, once they've done it because that day their paycheck didn't come in, it's coming in the next day, but then they get a rush. They get a high, and it's more elevated than they've ever gotten before from shopping addiction. You know, maybe the shopping addiction plateaued, and they didn't think it could get any better.
It's like shopping plus.
It is.
You know, the fact that you got it for free.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a whole different high.
Yeah,
right?
that's right. There's that sense of accomplishment.
There is, and that it's, you know, it's illegal. It's a rush.
Do you see, like, one of the things that we see with somebody who stops cocaine and was often will move to something behavioral like gambling. Do you ever see that? They stop a drug and then end up shopping more?
Cross addiction, yeah, definitely.
Cross addiction.
Yeah, so there's a lot of addictions that they fuse together. Maybe this individual has an alcohol addiction, and they never really recognize that. They go shopping, they go home, and the ritual is, after shopping, I have a couple glasses of wine.
Yeah.
But the glasses of wine have always been there beforehand, and then, you know, maybe they stop that alcohol. But what's going to happen is that shopping is going to increase because they've replaced that they've had two addictions, kind of, you know, side by side, hand in hand. But when one goes, it's a scale. The other one goes up.
Yeah. Now, you know, the other thing I think of is how society really plays on this. So, you know, we have like the stores like IKEA where they deliberately make it so that you end up buying more than you need, to the Christmas sales and all that kind of stuff. Do either of you want to comment on that?
Well, sadly enough, I mean, I think we live in a consumer society, right? It's always the newest thing, the latest thing, the biggest thing, the fastest thing, the brightest thing.
For hoarding, they're going out.
The storage bins that you can buy.
Do you know that the external storage is the second largest growing industry?
Oh my God, really?
Well, part of it's the baby boomers, right?
Yes.
They're inheriting their parents' things, and they've got their own things, and then they're downsizing, and then the kids come back, so they want to hold on to a couch or two in case the children are setting up an apartment. So that sandwich generation is in a very uncomfortable position, and, you know, they're, to a certain extent, there's a rational basis for it. The difference, though, with hoarding is that what the person is getting probably doesn't change that object of attraction. I haven't seen that kind of versatility. I've seen people who have 4 or 5 categories, and they excel at those. But because something disappears doesn't mean that something else will increase. However, if the person goes through a particularly anxious experience, the whole volume of what they already did might ramp up.
Can you tell by looking at somebody's storage bin who's a hoarder versus who's adaptive?
You really have to go back to the 3 criteria. Do we have time for me to tell you what those are?
Oh yeah, we do. Sure.
Okay, the first is what most people would call an excessive accumulation.
Okay.
And I like to say a failure to discard proportionately. So that's not a matter of one thing in, one thing out. It's a matter of having an intrinsic sense of life's imbalance is getting out of balance, and I'll do something about it. The second thing is some or all of the living spaces can't be used for their intended purpose. There may be room in the house for a freezer, but you don't normally put it in the living room.
Yes.
All right? You normally put a freezer where you're going to use it. You wouldn't put your pots and pans in the dining room, because
or you can't put your car in the garage anymore.
And the practicing psychiatrist that I was telling you about before had a shopping addiction for sure at night and would hold on to it. Her oversized double garage had easily $1 million worth of unopened shopping channel boxes.
Wow.
So the two can kind of go hand in hand, but it's about the retention. You see the difference? those boxes never got opened.
Yeah.
It was.
You still have a third item,
And
but I want to invite callers, if you have any questions about your own shopping or your own hoarding or storing, please give us a call. So,
And the
category
third criteria that has to be present, even to a minimal degree, is somebody is either already concerned or upset, or they have cause to be. If they knew the truth about the state of the environment, the risks that exist there, health or safety risks,
Yes.
they would have cause to be concerned. Now that can be your neighbor if they live below you in an apartment building on either side. It could be the fire department would have cause to be concerned.
Yeah.
Your mortgage company, your insurer, your family, your children.
Yes.
Children's services if you have children.
Yes.
Animal control or SPCA if you have animals.
Interesting. Okay, so we have about 20 minutes left, and I really want to get to treatment and you know, what can we do about this? Because it sounds like it's a multifactorial thing. I mean, the other thing that I really think is interesting is we know that addiction has a genetic component, and apparently so does hoarding. So, well, actually, can you address that quickly, and then I want to get to treatment.
So, 3 pathways that can lead to hoarding.
Yes.
One is genetics. We know that 84% of people who have who hoard have a mother, father, sister, brother who also hoards.
Really?
Yes. We know that there are 4 chromosomes with markers in common. What we don't, and not about all hoarding, and we don't know enough about that to use that to predict who will and who won't, unfortunately.
Right.
That research hasn't been done. Second path is, we were talking about before, if you hoard, if you have one of a list of other mental health disorders, some of those will give you a higher risk of also having hoarding set in.
Like OCD.
OCD,
or addiction.
Addiction.
Yeah.
There's a list of them, okay? And the third criteria we're all a little vulnerable to, and that is those people who are just chronically a little bit disorganized, all right? Never quite on top of things, and then they become vulnerable. Either by one big event that brings them to their knees, or a series of smaller events but in a compressed period of time, so they can't get back up and restabilize. And when they go down, the word I hear the most, Vera, is overwhelmed. And when you're overwhelmed, your executive function starts slowing down. You can't get to D through B and C.
Yeah. Okay, so we have a caller. Can you tell me what the 4th criteria is quickly?
No, there are only 3 criteria.
So
there are
that
4
was it.
types.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, let's get our caller. Anna Maria, you have a call. Do you want to speak to our hoarding specialist or our addiction specialist?
I just want to actually ask the whole panel a question.
Okay.
My question is that I understand that alcohol and drug addiction is it consists of a mental obsession, and once you give way to this mental obsession, this thought that you have a need, then you develop this physical craving. So my question is along the lines of: Is shopping addiction along the same lines as drug addiction? And do you treat shopping addiction the same way that you would treat somebody who has an addiction, say, to alcohol or drugs? And I just want to say one more thing. So that is my question. Would you treat it the same way?
Yeah.
Because I remember when I'm in recovery. So when I first sobered up, I actually had a shopping addiction. I had this fear that because I'd lived so long without anything, I lived all of my life being completely broke because I'd spend my money on alcohol. So when I did get clean and sober, I started hoarding things with this fear that I would never have enough, or that I never wanted to be without again. But as I treated my alcohol and drug addiction, I lost this need to always accumulate other things.
Okay, okay.
So,
do you want to address the idea, is it an addiction? And then probably we'll have to go for a break soon, then we'll talk about the treatment.
So hands down,
Hang on, Anna Marie.
hands down, Anna Marie, it is an addiction. Where we see the difference between substances and behavioral addictions is when we look at the substances. There are three major substances that we really worry about. So alcohol, opiates, and benzodiazepines. And why we worry about these is because there's such a physical dependency that when you withdraw from them, it creates a medical issue. We also see, physical dependency with other things as well, but not to the same degree where it creates this medical urgency. When you look at behavioral addictions, there isn't that physical dependency, but there is that psychological dependency. So you're reinforcing kind of that pleasure center in the brain, but because other parts of your brain haven't become dependent on it, your body hasn't become dependent on it, there isn't the same medical risks. We're going to speak about treatment, but quickly with that, you do treat it similarly. What you want to do is you want to stop the behaviors. You want to intervene on those behaviors. The difference between substance addiction and behavioral addiction, what we do want to do is teach you how to have a healthy relationship with money. Individuals with heroin addiction or cocaine addiction, we're never going to teach those things. We're never going to show somebody how to have a healthy relationship with those substances. From there, we look at what is the root cause of this addiction. Often we have this addiction because it's fulfilling a need, it's filling a void, it's satisfying something other than the addiction itself. And so we want to look at that. We want to look at coping. And so, we just provide different coping mechanisms as well.
Okay, we're going to go for a break in a few minutes. I want you to hold on because I want you to address the... Anna Marie, hang on, because we want to ask you further questions once we talk about treatment.
Okay.
But we will be right back after the break with more help on Toronto Speaks Addiction. Welcome back to Toronto Speaks Addiction. Today we're discussing and taking your questions on excessive shopping and hoarding, and now how to treat these addictive behaviors. So before break we were talking to Anna Marie about, and please I hope you're still on the line because we want to get back to you, talking about the addictive piece, and now we want to address the actual treatment piece. So Elaine, did you want to pick up on that?
Well, I just wanted to say that with Anna Marie,
yes.
The fact that when she developed more skill and more insight into her the relationship of her addiction to alcohol, that had a rollover effect, as it were, with developing the same insight about the items that she kept excessively.
Right.
And that would not normally happen
so
if
that
was a hoarding disorder.
Right.
What happens with hoarding, so that's good news for you, Anna Maria. What what normally happens with hoarding is that even though that other coexisting mental health condition, disorder, improves significantly, when hoarding has kicked in, that requires specialized treatment for the hoarding disorder.
Okay, okay. Now, Anna Maria said that she felt she needed more because she had become from deprivation from her addiction. She needed more and more and more. But it sounds to me like you're thinking that that insight broke the bubble.
Absolutely.
Anna Maria, did you want to add something or ask something further?
Actually, I just want, I quite understand what the panel is saying, is that it really is about behavior change. Does the person who's actually that needs treatment for this, do they attend inpatient treatment centers, like to be removed from the problem, or do they have outpatient programs for people like that? So. Yeah.
You're talking about the shopping piece or the hoarding piece?
Yeah, both. Actually, both.
Both.
Like,
so that's a great question, and I think that's something that a lot of people out there aren't aware of, and I think that's great that you asked that question. When you look at addiction specifically, we want to meet a client where they're at, and there is a huge spectrum of addiction. The most important thing is that when a person recognizes that they need help, is that they reach out. First step is reach out to a professional. They can then determine where do you fit on that spectrum. What are you able to do? Not always is residential necessarily what you have to do. Some individuals with early intervention, maybe it's one-to-one counseling. Maybe they need a little bit more than one-to-one counseling. Maybe it's group therapy with one-to-one. Maybe it's an intensive outpatient program. Maybe it is residential.
Okay. Did you want, you had a few things to say about treatment, which I don't think you've had a chance to say.
Treatment for hoarding, the way I do it, and I learned this early on in my career, is I do the counseling in the context of the environment where the hoarding occurs.
You go to the house.
So I go to the house and we work with the things that are proving extremely difficult to stop acquiring, that are difficult to resist saving and holding on to, or that third way that the bottleneck gets created, and that is the failure to be able to make the decisions and sort what's important and not important. So there are 3 points on that continuum where the bottleneck gets created in hoarding situations.
And you help them with that?
I do.
Okay.
I do.
Anna Maria, we have another caller, so I hope that was helpful to you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for calling in. Chris, you have the air to ask one of us about either shopping or hoarding.
A little bit of both, actually. So the story behind it is my younger brother, I think he started getting a shopping addiction to clothes. Almost every weekend or every other weekend he goes shopping with his friends to the mall or with his girlfriend, and almost every single time he comes home with about $100, $200 worth of clothes. And it's gotten to the point where after laundry day, it's like he has so much clothes that everything gets piled up on the dressers or the cabinets or even on his bed, and instead of sleeping on his bed, he's sleeping on the couch downstairs.
Chris, we've only got about 4 more minutes left in the show, so I'm sorry, I'm going to ask you to kind of get to the point with the questions so that we have time for the panelists to respond.
Yeah, sorry.
No
so my question is, how would I talk to my brother about trying to tell him, look, this is starting to become a problem? How would I start the intervention and convince him that this is starting to be a problem?
Yeah.
You want to go for that?
Yeah, for sure. Really, the reality of it is you got to ask the questions. You got to not be afraid to have those conversations. Be very compassionate, caring. Make sure that it is coming from a place of support, and maybe a place of curiosity. You know, hey, you know, Chris, I'm kind of wondering about this. This is what I'm seeing, and maybe hold up a mirror to his behaviors and say, maybe you're not seeing this, but this is what the rest of us are seeing, and how do you feel about that? Really also look at, you know, is this affecting the rest of his life? Is it impeding on him, you know, growing as a young man? Is he not going to school or work because of it?
Yeah. Did you want to add something to that?
I guess because we're really short of time, Chris, I'm going to ask you if you think that this could be hoarding because you've listened to the criteria for hoarding, or you suspect it might be. go to my website, www.hoarding.ca. There are a host of resources there, and exactly the question you've asked. I created a video called "Are You Worried About Someone's Acquiring Behavior?"
Interesting.
And I take people through the steps of how to initiate and keep that communication that you want to have on track, so that you stand the best chance of getting out the other end of that conversation
you have some
with
questions.
results.
You also have some questions on your website about for people just to ask if they're hoarders.
Take a quiz.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
That's great. Okay, so we're really getting low on time. So is there something that you would like to encapsulate, make sure that people know about?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is if there's anybody out there that's questioning whether they, a family member, a friend has a shopping addiction or any addiction for that matter, the biggest thing is reach out. Do a Google search. There are places like Bellwood Health Services. There's a lot of counseling service out there. But just reach out. That's the biggest thing.
Something you want to say, maybe a message of hope or clarity?
So if you're out there and you're feeling overwhelmed and you're feeling stuck, no matter what the issue is, whether it's hoarding or anything else, people do get better. So dare to reach out and ask for help. The worst thing that can happen is that you get better.
That's great. That's great. Okay, so I really want to thank our callers. Anna Marie, thank you so much. And Chris, I hope we answered your question for you. We're basically out of time. So again, thank our guests, Joshua Montgomery and Elaine Birchall. I'd like to thank our callers again and see you next time on Toronto Speaks Addiction. Thanks for watching.